Great. Welcome everyone who just came in from the waiting room. You're just in time. Tonight, we're going to start with Amitar James. She's the author of the poetry collection, Song of My Softening, forthcoming from Alice James Books, August 2022, and the chapbook Daughter Tongue, included in the African Poetry Book Fund 2018 New Generation African Poets box set. James's poems appear in print and in digital journals, including Poetry Foundation, Paris Review, the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day, which is how I first read her work, The Believer, Lit Hub, and Poetry Society of America, as well as several anthologies. She is the recipient of a City Artist Corps grant, a NISCA-NIFA Poetry Fellowship, an Artist Relief Grant, a 92nd Street Y Discovery Poetry Award, a Breadloaf Catherine Bakeless Nason Award in Poetry, a 2019 finalist for the Brunel International African Poetry Prize, the inaugural Thomas Lux Scholarship from the Palm Beach Poetry Festival, a Nancy P. Schneider Academy of American Poets Prize, and residency fellowships from Canem and Lambda Literary, among other awards. She was born in Britain and is the daughter of Nigerian and Trinidadian immigrants. She has lived in England, Scotland, and was raised primarily in America. She holds a BA in creative writing from Hofstra and an MFA in poetry from NYU. Jericho Brown says of Song of My Softening, Omotara James is a poet of the body, and Song of My Softening moves us emotionally as it reminds us of our physical and sensual selves. These poems beg to be spoken aloud, as one sister might to another, or as one sister might to an audience of sisters. These are daring poems from a poet brave enough to take the kind of risks that lead to beauty. Quote, your fat spills soft across the moonlit crown of grass. Your soulmates are a gaggle of fish, shoaling thick until you are schooled enough in this love. Please help me welcome Amitar James.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jennifer. Hudson Valley Writers Center, hello. I'm so happy to be reading here for the first time and really looking forward to Doug and Cindy and hearing your poems this evening. It's my pleasure and my honor to be here. And I see a lot of familiar names and faces, including my dad. Hi, Dad, Valerie, Daniel. Okay, shout outs. So I'd like to begin with a poem written after Khalil Gibran, the Lebanese poet. I was first introduced to his work via my father. He introduced me to his collection, The Prophet. And so what I love about Khalil's work is that it investigates a lot of binaries. And one poem in particular on joy and sorrow, that's a poem that has been working on me, I think, for most of my life. And what I love about that poem is the inextricable link between joy and sorrow. In it, Gibran writes, your joy is your sorrow unmasked. And so this poem, my first poem, really is an investigation of that in the voice of sorrow. And I wrote it, you know, with my framework of an eldest daughter. I guess that's what I was thinking about, and everything it means to be an eldest daughter. So this is called Said Joy to Sorrow. Excuse me, Said Sorrow to Joy. What stands between us, the hours never parted, when you were a soft nothing, molten child. I blew you to bubble, to bulb, to bloom, yawned the paradigm of time into the weak fire of light. I made you synonymous till my knees bowed, carried and hoarded the original ode, tight-lipped, heavy-lunged. Do you remember what you were singing when Khalil renamed you in breath, dressed you with language, adorned you in prayer? When I was the first to suffer, barely blown and bastard, I hushed your hardly husked first flesh, shucked, and finally you. So I'm hoping we have Janet Jackson fans here among us. I remember being a kid and watching all of her music videos. And there was one in particular that to this day is still my favorite. It's the Got Till It's Gone video that features Joni Mitchell. And what I loved so much about that video was that it was a Black kind of urban, artistic utopia. And it was really cool. And so thinking about, my early ethos and the music and the art that inspired me, I wanted to write an ode to that video. So check it out. I'm sure it's on YouTube. So this poem is called You Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone, after a Mark Romanek video with Janet Jackson featuring Q-Tip and Joni Mitchell. We pivot like we pray for no gaze. Only Black shines in its darkness and light, by which I mean on and on and on. Like steam, music be how the message bodies to the sky, is what I see in Janet's smile. She, brown and glittered golden, leathered and cool. Q-Tip on the beat and Joni Mitchell never lies. Black be the thing you can never quantify. Catch us kissing and mending our bodies in the blue-black. Catch us blasting and dirty whining in the lamplight. The summer, Miss Jackson teaches rhyme to hug its own line. My back bending, twisted toward sorrow, all that time, waiting for song to arrive. A lot of my poems from my debut collection are informed by art. This is another ekphrastic poem based on a retrospective by the late photographer Alvin Baltrop. If you're not familiar with his work, he died in 2004. He was a photographer and really a storyteller, and he was known for his street photography. He was Black, queer, and a lot of his work centered around what was like the dilapidated area of the Hudson Piers at that time, not as developed as it is now. And the subject for many of his photographs were gay youth and a lot of what was labeled at the time subculture. And really, he just told, stories that of people who weren't being told. And so I had the the blessing to be invited to his retrospective at the Bronx Museum. And there were so many intimate photos. And this is an imagined telling of one of those photos. It's called Pier 52. He looks through the wound of my life like it's light. So I let him. The last cube of ice outside the tray, where I found him, my lover, melts atop this brick, as if it's our last whiskey together. His brown, more fragrant, more dangerous than whiskey. You couldn't miss him. Nothing lasts of promise. Such is the promise of light. Not even day breaks between us. Black joy cresting over and over the summer sun. Kept a spiral of his hair in a box like a favor. His favorite pair of trainers. The taste of his lips where we first kissed, where we first blissed. I couldn't, though I tried, to keep him. Wouldn't keep still, nor true. Keep up. How could he keep me when he refused to keep time? Didn't keep me in compliments. Was I supposed to keep sweet? Look, we discovered day like it was fire, flesh like empire, touch like bloodlight. Yes, count me down like a missile. As of tomorrow and the day after, as of this darkening gelatin and silver, as of the moon and the monsoon rain, as of these piers, as of America and all of its splendor, as of the alleyway and the archive, as of this f-stop and this fuck and the next, as of this click and shutter, as of the daffodil and every queer thing that obliterates winter. So it was interesting writing that poem and trying to enter a fictionalized relationship. And relationships are often complicated. And this poem is about that very fact. It was also taken from an article I read in the British paper, The Independent, about a festival, an annual festival that happened in which a bull ended up being killed after it was chased. Many people are familiar with Pamplona, and it's definitely that sort of festival. So I'm going to begin with the epigraph. A bull killed itself on a wooden post after being sent into a terrified frenzy when its horns were set on fire in front of a baying crowd. From The Independent. Sonnet of the Bull. The only woman I ever loved came with an army of strangers to kill me. So I made myself a star. My pads cracking the cobbled streets free of the past. We began as two animals running free, but our fat days burned thin beneath the wide eye of grief. Had I not outpaced the delicate body of my birth, she might have never noticed me. Alas, one forgoes the rescue of love when your lover is the matador and your soulmate the sunless rage. The chase, the only stroke of pleasure to part you with soft hands. Hot breath on the heels of your final gallop, then bam. Bull despairs amidst the frenzy and dies instantly. Death, a picture made of light, sings for me. Because love croons like a surprise torch of fire. Because love comes for your horns. In this next poem, again, I'm investigating, what I am throughout this collection, binaries, constructs that inform our lives so deeply, but they're almost invisible because we take them for granted, such as girlhood and what that means, juxtaposed to womanhood, and when we leave one and enter another, what does it mean to have innocence? What does it mean to lose it? Half girl, then elegy. Having fallen while no one was looking, having borne what fell through, having fallen early, having barely fallen through myself, my luck so close to catching, having caught the worst of it, having fallen from the sky and then through it, having landed to realize I had been part, having parted the late sky, partly sky where I am delicate. I took a tumble through the night bloom. I took the night with me as I tumbled, delicate with the infinite, which swells from the tallest branch. Having grown swollen as low-hanging fruit, I tell Nadra I couldn't help it. The fresh heave of new breast, thick switch of hip, a group of unnamed gifts is called a steal. She says fruit you can reach is still precious. Her name means rare. Her lean thins toward the unusual. In Lagos, we name our girls darling, sincere, precious, because a name is a stake in the grave. Having grieved and taken on the way to Eros Thanatos, having arrived late to my own bloom. Have me like a walnut. Pry the part of me that is hollow from the part that yields fruit. So in this next poem, I just wanted to try an experiment. While I was at Hofstra, I got my degree, or my minor was in painting. And I like to collage, sometimes just for inspiration. When I'm starting a new project, I often like to collage and kind of map it out. So part of my process for this book was making a collage, but I thought maybe I would make a word collage. And so I did such, and then I decided that the different lines I would try to organize into a poem. And this is the result. It's also an ekphrastic response to an exhibit of Romare Bearden's. brilliant collagist. And I believe I saw that at the Brooklyn Museum, but his work is everywhere. You should absolutely look into it if you're not familiar. A genius, Black artist. Black art sonnet in which lines were shuffled and glued. Because Black folks know the feeling of being cut into strips and re-glued, I must stop my hands from reaching. While I gaze at a collage, I position them behind my back as I peer. Do I look a figure in his eye? Keep a hand in my pocket? Enact the colors, the cutting, the shapes? Should I mirror the Black outline? Hand on my hip, or gaze past the frame of him? Romare Bearden said, art is the soul of the people. My borrowed face, my grandmother's almond eye. Critiquing the masterpiece of myself that ain't new. Face of a borrowed boy looking back at me. This queer, unblinking existence. Bodies like oceans. Spare me your thin tidings. Bring round your unsolicited fats, your baby fat, your tired fat, fat of the evening tide, fat of the early worm. Bring me that stubborn belly, fat of the unspoken, underdeserved, and unrequited, pocked, puckered, and long pummeled fat on fat on fat, fat, flesh that responds to touch, jiggles at the suggestion, a provocation of fat, tested to withstand the fallow ire. Please don't mention the memory of muscle without the tensile tenure. Long live the cross-legged splendor of fat privilege. O slender stride, whom do you comfort with your ease? Whose borders drape across your back? Clawed my way out of your clean love and into the world's fat shine, world that works to burn me. I stay alive and well rounded at every corner. Keep your thin spectacle, your airy hula hoop, fat of the forgotten republic. I lift you out of the shade. Let your contours spill over with light. I offer not the lemon, but the sour grove as heaven. And this is my last poem. Thank you so much for having me tonight. Body image. No matter how they try to claim you, your body can never belong to them. It will always be ours. Piece by piece, I made you whole with my love, shaped you to share with the world. I gave you unbroken portion of my portion, this body, our sacred text and map back to me. However you fall, fail, submit to frailty, your body cannot conceal the message. My love, you are the message. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a gorgeous reading. Not only are your poems so great, you read them so well too. We cannot wait for your book to come out. It's August, right? And it's coming. And I put the pre-order link in the chat because if you ordered directly from Alice James, you can order it now and it will be shipped to you as soon as it comes out. So thank you so much, Omatara. That was wonderful. It was great to hear you read. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Cindy Veach. Cindy Veach is the author of Her Kind and Gloved Against Blood, both from Cabin Carey Press. Gloved Against Blood was named a Patterson Poetry Prize finalist and a Massachusetts Center for the Book Must Read. And she also wrote the chapbook Innocence from Nick's Mate Press. Her poems have appeared in the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, Agni, Chicago Review, Prairie Schooner, Sugar House Review, Poet Lore, Michigan Quarterly Review, among many others. Her poem, This Patch Where the Light Cannot Reach, was selected by Mary Ruffel for the Philip Booth Poetry Prize. Her sonnet Crown, Witch Kitsch, was selected by Marilyn Nelson for the Samuel Washington Allen Prize from the New England Poetry Club. She received an MFA from the University of Oregon, where she was a graduate teaching fellow and an assistant poetry editor for Northwest Review. She is now co-poetry editor of Mom Egg Review. January Gill O'Neill, who's here tonight in our audience, hi January, wrote about Her Kind. Cindy Veach's powerful second collection emphasizes why poetry is essential. Her impeccable ear, her reclaiming of the witch myths from the Salem witch trials, the end of her long marriage intertwined with this country's fraught political landscape, make us more aware of the world around us. She reconciles history while living it by using voices from the past to infuse the present. These gritty lyrical poems continually enrich and surprise. Her writing is transformative. How lucky we are to witness this book as it shapeshifts, becomes bells, fingers, spires, becomes omen. And Kelly Russell Aganon said, I hardly ever tell people, go out and buy this book, but I've done it with this one. Please help me welcome Cindy Veach.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. That was very generous. And Omotara, that was beautiful reading. The sounds are incredible in your poems. I love the sonnet of the bowl, and the love comes from for your horns. Just amazing work. So let me, so I am going to read from Her Kind tonight. This book is themed around the Salem witch trials. I lived in the Salem area for about 30 years, and this book began with an intense desire to counter Salem's witch kitsch narrative by writing poems about the victims. But during the time I was writing those poems, I was also experiencing the end of a long marriage, and Donald Trump was elected president. So my vision for the book evolved and it became more complicated. It wanted and needed to connect the history of the witch trials with contemporary events that were both personal and political. Many of the poems incorporate verbatim texts from the Salem witch trials documents, which are italicized in print, and you may be able to pick them out when I read. So thank you all for being here tonight. It's really an honor to read as part of this series. I witch. So what if I woke up changed? It's not like I'm a wild hog or some evil thing, not a real hog that follows you home, jumps into the window, a monkey with cock's feet with claws. Don't believe what my accuser says, or believe it. The fact is, my divorce attorney's building sits on the site of the prison where they kept the accused in chains in 1692. I came there with a silk scarf worn loosely at the neck, borders looped with colored thread. He came with daisies dark chocolate and proclaimed, "My wife came towards me and found fault with me. Downstairs in the dungeon, they chained us to the walls to keep our spirits from escaping in the likeness of a bird." This next poem is titled Spectral Evidence. This was a type of testimony in which a witness could claim that the accused had appeared to them and done harm to them in a dream or in a vision. And this was allowed in the courts during the Salem witch trials. Spectral evidence. Because she said she saw, and therefore these pinholes in her skin, on one arm to be exact, look how they crisscross make a doily of the flesh. And because she said she saw you, not you, take a small pin from your pocket, a straight pin with a flat head. And because she said it was, therefore you, therefore not a dream, puncturing each pore, you in the flesh, not flesh, with a common pin. 14 of the 20 victims of the Salem witch trials were women, and many were accused because they had stepped outside of Puritan norms, often through no fault of their own. So there is a poem for each of these 20 women in the book, and I'm going to read 3 of those now. I call them the victim poems. They were all hanged on July 19, 1692. Elizabeth Howe of Sorrows. I had to be my husband's eyes, the light that could not reach them, leading him about by the hand, tilling the land my father gave me, running the household. And for this, they would not let me come into the church of Ipswich. And for this, they said I bewitched horses, cows, sows, and was the cause of sorrows that killed the Pearlie's little Hannah. No, never in all my life. I saw I had to be the husband, eyes, mouth, muscle, and took the lead and hanged for it. The title of this poem is a quote from Donald Trump. I have seen women manipulate men with just a twitch of their eye. Sarah Wilds. Of course, the crimson scarf, worn loosely at the neck, colorful and coy. Of course, the deceased first wife's sister, neighbor, accuser. Of course, the dispute over the Topsfield-Salem line, John Wild, surveyor and spouse. Of course, her gruffness, but at the same time, her beauty, also too great intimacy with one Thomas Wardell of Ipswich, although neither was married at the time. And of course, the whipping for fornication. Of course, too forward, wild in her youth, and glamorous in her youth, that too. Rebecca Nurse of the accused. At first, the jury returned not guilty, to which the judge said, retire and reconsider the not. After all, she had not answered the question she had not heard, guilty of being hard of hearing, maybe mouthing what? Guilty of having a temper, arguing with neighbors, guilty too of piety, 39 attesting to her deep devotion. Still, the afflicted swore it was her apparition that did the pinchings and prickings of their flesh. And in court, when she raised her arms, the afflicted raised their arms. And when she inclined her head, the afflicted inclined their heads. This poem is titled I, Kiki Mora. She was a mythological female house spirit or witch said to attach herself to a house and disturb the inhabitants, and in particular, the male inhabitants. I, Kiki Mora. The spider first classified the year I wed. Spider smaller than a speck of straw. Spider of the bog, of swamp, wetland, marsh, quagmire. A mere wisp of khaki chaff, of hair, a sphinx moth, night butterfly, invisible wraith who slips through the keyhole after dark, both beautiful and ugly, whiny, glass half empty, noisemaker, dish breaker, home wrecker, wet footprints across his heart. Tornado warning. When I think about it now, I'm fearless, but sometimes I still hear the hum of our minivan coming back from Iowa City, that 2-lane highway with too many white crosses, troopers flagging us down, ordering us to lie, belly down in the ditch, Iowa sky, imperial sky. Every spiny tendril that drops from a dark cloud reminds me of the bed fear made. Silence meant trouble, a brewing. I prayed for thunder. I welcomed the cackle of lightning, rages, yelling matches, but a sudden drop in pressure, the sucking out of sound. I got good at seeing it coming. Sky purpling, moving over our house slanting into shadow. I went down to the cellar to weather each storm. Tornadoes are cruel. Of course, I had to leave him. Ogre. Having come to a field, having come to a creek in a field, having come to seek out the beast in the knee of the field by the creek, the beast that lives in my field by my creek, having come to this apogee without a bead of belief in the hour of my need, having come in the hour of my need to my field by my creek and found him in my field by my creek, having come and refused to get down on my knees in my field by my creek, having come, having refused him, come now, Circe, disarm him. I filed for divorce and sundry other acts of witchcraft. Therefore, I am the earthquake and its tectonic plate, a rock chucked into a languid lake. I am the headache that keeps you awake, an unexpected snake at the end of the rake, a rock tossed into a placid lake. I am the shake that rattles the gate and the faux pas that deflates the cake, a rock dropped into a flat lake. I am a plague outbreak, the thirst you can't slake, a rock flung into a tranquil lake and the rip in something opaque. I am the damn stake in the landscape, the fire break that forsakes, a rock cast into a still lake, the mean old drake, the keepsake that's fake, a rock hurled into a serene lake, the cause of your toothache and the failed windbreak, every mistake, a rock pitched into a quiet lake. I am the one to hate, no one's namesake, the earthquake and its tectonic plate. He punishes me with flowers. Knowing they're my favorite, he brings red gaberas to the settlement meeting. Guilt schleps them back to my apartment. Guilt places them in the living room. I can barely look at them on the borrowed coffee table. Watch how I avert my eyes when I walk by. I decide to help them die, withhold water, resist investigating the stems for telltale signs of rot. They were scarlet, now they're darker. They're dried up blood. They sit there and insinuate. So I thought I'd read this next poem based on what's been happening in the Supreme Court. Poem the day after Kavanaugh is confirmed to the highest court in the land. When it's 76 degrees in October in New England, I consider it a reprieve, a bonus, a gold coin to slip in my pocket, and I put all else aside, go for a walk, reveling in snippets of conversation, baseball and football games, spilling from windows opened wide. And when I reach the sea that plashes away no matter what, I cheer an old couple that go for a swim. But inside I know this is the cusp of the end, of light, of warmth. And though my eyes want to hold the still blooming daisies, the wide-mouthed dahlias that I pass on my way home. And though I spare them the terrible news, my mind's eye sees only brown stalks, spent flowers. This is another victim poem, and the title is attributed to Donald Trump. Trump has called the investigation a witch hunt 84 times. Martha Carrier hanged August 19, 1692. They said she brought smallpox to Andover. They said she killed her father and brother, making her a queen in hell, AKA landowner. Neighbors testified it was none other than Goody Carrier who haunted them at night. They said she bit Sue Sheldon, threatening to cut her throat because she wanted her to sign the book. She stuck a pin in dumb Ann Putnam, killed Samuels Preston's cow for being very lusty. And there was that devil man whispering in her ear. Somehow she caused the death of Alan Toothaker's cat. For these complaints, though each one was a lie, she was condemned by the grace of God to die. So I'm going to read two more poems. Woman climbs Statue of Liberty in protest. Teresa Patricia Akumu, convicted of trespassing, 2018. She said, I climbed to protest our nation's zero tolerance immigration policy. She said, I climbed to abolish ICE. They said trespasser. They said disorderly conduct. When she sat on the skirts of Lady Liberty, we watched them climb after her. They said, get down. Our hero said, I'm not discouraged. She made her bed and we watched and cheered and put a curse on those who wanted to arrest her for protesting, putting children into cages. Oh yes, we witches watched her carry our truth up and over that ledge like a beautiful soothsayer, strong and lithe. Goodbye, dark ages. We climb with her. We climb with her. And the last poem is titled I Hecate. She was the Greek goddess of crossroads, and she ruled over the night, magic, and places where three roads meet. She's described as having three heads, a dog, a serpent, and a horse. And in other representations, her animal heads include a cow and a boar. So take your pick. I Hecate. Between queen, liminal sorceress, crossroads guardian, story of my life. Who are you today, my ex would taunt, more than just a Gemini, a trimorphous, human form in triplicate, birth, love, death, maiden, mother, crone, moon, earth, underworld. I'll take triplicity over duplicity any day. Three heads are better, even if one has to be a dog, a bitch. Dog, 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 serpent, horse, dog, cow, boar. Even if it means I am witch, that old crone at the cauldron, stirring willows, dark yew, blackthorn. It took a torch, a key, a dagger to cut away a past. It took 30 years. It took all three of me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Cindy. That was so great to hear you read the poems finally. Thank you for being
Thank
here
you.
with us. What a great evening. Now we're going to hear from Douglas Kearney. We're very excited to have you here. Douglas Kearney has published 6 collections, including Buck Studies from Fence Books in 2016, winner of the Theodore Roethke Memorial Poetry Award, the CLMP Firecracker Award for Poetry, and the California Book Awards Silver Medal in Poetry. His Mess and Mess and from Naomi Press in 2015 was a small press distribution handpicked selection that Publishers Weekly called an extraordinary book. He has received a Whiting Award, a Foundation for Contemporary Arts Cy Twombly Award for Poetry, residencies and fellowships from Canem, the Rauschenberg Foundation, and others. He teaches creative writing at the University of Minnesota and lives in St. Paul with his family. Eschewing performative typography, his show aims to hit crooked licks with straight-seeming sticks. Navigating the complex penetrability of language, these poems are sonic in their espousal of Black vernacular strategies, while examining histories and current events through the lyric, brand new dances, and other performances. Both dazzling and devastating, Show is a genius work of literary precision, wordplay, farce, and critical irony. In his stove-like imagination, Kearney has concocted poems that destabilize the spectacle, leaving looky-loos with an important uncertainty about the intersection between violence and entertainment. He uses the weapons of poetry to write a curriculum of justifiable rage. Beyond anger, there is exasperation, grief, despair, and mischief, says the New York Journal of Books. And Tracy K. Smith says, where, oh, where would we be without the dynamic intelligence and feats of lyric daring that Douglas Kearney's work has delivered to American poetry? Please help me welcome Douglas Kearney.
Thank you so much for that, Jennifer. And I want to thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Omotara. Thank you, Cindy. And also thank you, Mervyn. I know you're also putting work in. I'll get to it. Yeah, so let's start with the title poem from the collection Show. And something I have to make sure I say is that the poem uses a form that was invented by a student of mine named Indigo Weller. And that form is called a torsion, which is kind of lace weaving patterns. And Indigo adapted a sestina to make this form. And I think a lot of the poems I'm going to read about is like tonight hit this point where what we want a person to be falls into tension with who they are or who they want to be. So Show. Some need somebody or more to ape sweat on some site. Bloody pearl or dirty spit hocked up for the show. Who gets eaten? Rig body up, bow, bow to breeze a lazed jig, and sway to Griggs' good fiddling, pine deep dusk, a spot where stood body. Thus they clap when I mount, bonk, jig up the lectern, bow to say it's all good. We gathered, withstood the bends of dives, deeper, darker. They clap as I get down, sweat highlights my body. How meats died bloody. Look fresher for show wing. I got deep, spit out my mouth, a rigid red rind, bloody melon. Ha! No sweat, joking. Nobody knows the trouble. Rig full of deus. Show why fix this mess. Spit in tragedy's good eye. This one's called gogglers, then bow housefully. They clap, be misunderstood. Hang notes high or deep. Make my tongue a bow. What's the gift? My good songbox, the gift. Jiggle, nickels from deep down my craw. They clap. So jolly. Stood on that bank. Body picked over. Blood Ratto. Braxton Sweat brow syndrome. Spits out a sax bell. Rig a negrocious show of fields. For show sweat equals work. Bloody ink pot of body. I stay nib dipped. Show never run dry. Rigorously I spit out stressed feet. Lines jig. Ha 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 ha. Good one that eye is bow deep but not outstood. Shining dim. They clap. Wave slapping hulls. Deep don't mean sunken. Goods not yummy, right? Bow blanched with foam. Jig jigs. This one's called they clap. Barrow so much deep ends upon dead. I stood, I on that bloody rise of sweet body. There you is too. Sweat, it lets. They clap, right? Some ass post, spit to lip. I said, show. This next poem is called Property Values. And you know, it's funny, like whenever the police kill a Black person, you know, there's like this grace period where when they watch, you know, Black people burn shit, it's like, oh, you know, well, you know, this is cathartic. But then it's like somebody starts saying things like, oh, but what about the CVS? Or what about the Target? You know, I get that, you know, you're upset, but, you know, you're burning property. And it's not yours, set on stolen land. You know, this is a kind of a thing that's really fascinating to me. So this poem is called Property Values, and it is an aspirational poem. Property values. I aspire to be a CVS. Lord, I wanna be a drugstore in my heart, or a nice neighborhood, a rapless gas up in my heart, a legit ballot. I perspire all night at it. That my sweat, alchemical, of shit makes gold, factual. Consider spent plantation dirt, arena turf, recording booth. What transmogrifies these sans my properties? If it could, it should, it's been bottled. Me, I transsued this solvent, sun up to you know when, then turn up as you know what. When it come time for one time to calm or gun sunshine through us bin crying hues, mustn't the copper figure, were its heart full of mouthwash, hair care products, and miscellaneous cheap electronics, I'd serve, protect. Lord, my escalators would all descend, and all for sale would glisten. So I'm gonna do a couple of poems, some ones that I haven't read a lot. A couple of them are world premieres, but another one's just not one I read. And I'm gonna read this one because Omotara read the Janet Jackson poem, and that video was dope. I started writing this series of Prince hair poems, like shortly after Prince died. And now that I live in the Twin Cities, you know, I feel like especially like it's important that I read these. So these poems, I'm only gonna read one tonight though. And these poems are about kind of two things at once. They are like kind of like ekphrastic recordings of me watching Prince videos, but also like me paying a special attention to his hair. There's actually a graphic that this visual artist made that tracks Prince's hairstyles for like, I think like 35 years. It's kind of a beautiful image. It's like, you know, so you can see, oh, this was during 1999. Oh, this was during Graffiti Bridge. So I'm gonna do Thieves in the Temple, which is a song from the much maligned film and soundtrack Graffiti Bridge. But Thieves in the Temple was a jam, but you know, like there's some shit in this poem, in this video. And one of the things that you should know before, if you've not seen the video in a very long time, is that the video begins with Morris Day, who is Prince's sort of cinematic rival in Purple Rain and in Graffiti Bridge, getting into a limousine with the poet and singer-songwriter Ingrid Chavez. They are both highly intoxicated, and Morris is adding more alcohol to Ingrid Chavez's glass. The valet Jerome kind of opens up the door to them and then shuts them in there. And the impression that we get is that as they drive off, Morris Day is giving her more alcohol and will rape her that night. Prince, standing on a building high above all of this, is angry, but he's not angry because Morris Day is about to sexually assault Ingrid Chavez. He is angry because she is not with him right now. Thieves in the Temple, 1990. Hung horny pony, tail swang, pulled so no must hoofing, go side sweat bang, half hoods him down some bad styly alley. Up rooftop, tongue, his harp, come on, urban heaven, come on. He lit blue, lit red like the fuzz jacked him grinded. Yo, back up, brothers, got his back. Bucked running men's, they juke as all boss ass he, Rusto and AKA. My bad. Buccaneer dipped, shucked, hip slacked, prithy, them thigh highs, kick dead on, it new jack choreo, heel on rock, other clocking. Quick, hurry. First, wake naked, do a bed-headed alphabet street, then peep vid window into vid's amok conjure. Dig you in gangsta black. Last, dismiss missteps and wardrobe, 2 women proxy down. Yes, what for though? Revolution's over. He split the diff for new power. Who got the party? Who got the party? Who? He pressed breezy do wanna be your echo. While my ears slide brick walls down at street bound bumps, he dry hump the aura he claimed as he and the clip forget the time took her. All right, so let's see. I'm now gonna read a poem called Dogged, which is kind of riffing off of, you know, one of the things that W.B. Du Bois talked about when he was talking about double consciousness was that it was only a kind of a dogged strength that keeps people from tearing themselves apart. And the person who introduced me to that quote really intensely was a poet friend of mine named Ahmad Jamal Johnson. So this poem is for him, and it is called Dogged. Was my strength here where I stood prior, I stay together like a dog and what it's caught thrashing. Up this maw is meat, thus tear away, then bone, thus what's left, what's left? Body down, I'm low so to hunt myself out. Be got. True, I taught me some tether. True, I won't get away this time. I was at myself good there. I crouch over me, clatter some haunch, chatter some jaws, slabber, want to get the meat to eat better, thrash my head, no, and caught. I'm all yes, my body there and torn away, open as maw was, then red. Once bones got in the maw, I go prostrate, devoted and theoretic. In a poached country, all no, yes, besetting itself to sick what's itself, what's not. I'm those. Though such a country won't see me say by song a knell, I'm thus used to song, the maws, into my body, oh, out the maw, all, oh, what it is, what it isn't, dogged hunting. I'm in the way of such a country. Better thrash if I want to tear away, and don't I want better go, no, oh, so whole and whole, so maw, what maw gives body, what that body sing, oh, cuff, oh, cordon, oh, camera, how being placed take you. And I was saying about myself that this is, oh, such a country, hunting, countries all, more, it give too. I was given the maw in the way of this country. The maw used to like tool or like accustomed, like was the maw used I was anyway given this maw, a new name to be called when I get called to tell me when to do. Simple instructions, tricks. The dog stay, person go. The dog get the meat to be got. Yes, use to it. Dog, 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 to that place for which some sigh. Not singing just now, though. Oh, all up in this country. So no, 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 I was never another thing. Or meet my, I tear it away in the way of such a country. What it is, isn't my body, the maw open, singing now of the, done singing just now. Even so, I'm song used to what's left but the maw set upon my body placed all maw. Oh, the hunt, I'm used to it. Still, how my pulse double. All right, I have a little bit more time, so I'm gonna just read like a couple more. Oh, cool, yeah. About 6 minutes. That's true. 6 minutes on. All right. So this is one of the world premiere ones. And I was writing this series of poems about the word was yellow. And I just started writing all these poems about yellow, and they started turning out to be kind of like making a family album of these poems. And so I'm going to definitely read the one for my daughter, Kalila. And I might read the one for my son, Elijah, but I want to make sure I end with this other poem. So we'll see what happens. All right, so the series is called Yellow. This is the one for my daughter. My daughter bout her pink, and PJ say she bout her pink, and plastic say, and sucrose, heart say, girl, you bout that pink. We hadn't bought, knew better than to pink her eye, and shoelace say she bout her pink, and bicycle say she bout her pink, and bicycle helmet be, hell yeah, girl, you bout that pink. We hadn't bought her, we knew better, but it's a pink weather her hair get wet in. She caught pink cold, forehead ran hot, pink, bout a pink cough, hack pink hawk, pink snot she sleeve off, her nose stick there, crust to a glistening rasp, what scrape her, brown face, pink cum, she sneeze again, bout that, she sneeze again, bout of pink wheeze. We hold yellow close to her skin, salve of dandelion, close our eyes, wish we. And I'm gonna end with this poem called Eros. And Eros is it's a portmanteau. It's a new word. It's a neologism. It's all of those things. You got to do shit like that as a professional poet, and you have to like make new words occasionally. It's a part of the union, I think. So Eros is spelled E-R-R-O-S. And so it's a collision of the word eros and to make an error. And the idea here is that if I think about the idea of talking about physical, like the body, somatics that involve sensuality, but also can involve a kind of tension or cruelty, I have a kind of an issue in using eros to describe the experience of the Black diaspora, right? We have a very different relationship historically to proximity and to a kind of closeness and sort of friction. So Eros is speaking to that, not kind of rooting it into a Roman Gerber baby. So this poem is written after Akilah Oliver and L.H. Stallings. All right, so this is called Eros, and this is going to be my final poem. Thank you all again. The whole premise is flaw. The hull a wood prophylactic for aquatic wood. Can't you feel the motion of the ocean? We sing in millions of mouths. We go deep and sleepless, except it's all someone's wet dream. We are and we is grinding. I'll coin grind. Won't Google that for fear I've made nothing. I'm not afraid of nothing except making it. I don't want to conjure rats, but they're everywhere. When I nibble on my wife's neck, how deep in her is screaming? Do you remember when we fell in? All the mid-tempos tell us rock. Can't you feel the motion? All the slow jams call us to grind. We grind. All the crunk slaps are fucking slavers. Tell me what to do, will you? This isn't about history. My junk bounces athwart me even when I look over my shoulder. I will not conjure chains, but maybe the fuzzy kind from the sex shop. By chains, I mean cuffs. I'm not fuzzy about what chains are. This isn't about history. Outside, the ocean soaks the ship's wood on its progress. Whap, whap, whap. That's a wet-ass problem. Fap, fap, fap is the sound of hacked skin. Any doc about slave ships, a leaked sex tape. Any such sex tape probably probably a snuff flick. The problem's not the wetness, all you fretting sexists. The Defuna canoe exists. It's that the erotic isn't mine, as in nigga, as in Eros ain't my god, as in I didn't dream a Gerber baby on the lube tube, slippery. The next wave gets me wet. This isn't about the future. Keel in some black mouths is murder. Murder in some black mouths is stabbing. Stabbing in some black mouths is pitching. Can't you feel the motion of the ocean? Swells pitching the boat. Set a course for adventure. Sweetest reward. I am trying to get my genitals in order. They're down here in hors d'oeuvre. Some of it's mine. That shit isn't strange. Packed in tight. Somebody say, get it up. I'm next on deck to jump too. I drop and give them 20. My man don't like me letting myself go. Slap, slap, slap. Bend over to the front. Slap, slap, slap. Touch your toes. Slap, slap, slap. Get low. I go down in the hall. I'm a candlelit dinner. I'm an hors d'oeuvre and the little something sexy what gets slept on in this romantic darkness. I am the dessert. Insert entendre before you come to consciousness. Can't say consummate without consume. We'll grind it down to coin. They reach into their pockets and linger till they flip the money shot. The rat's on my face. If I holler, rats in some black mouths. It's too dim to know whose name I better say. A fetish floats a boat. God ships his christened in his. Won't pray to that pray to that. Cruise? I can't trust the mouth but spit me out to kiss me right. Some fuckery. Goddamn infants want to screw everybody. This isn't about history. Thank you.
Wow. I was going to ask you to read the one for your son too, but maybe we want to sit with that one for a little while and maybe you come back to it during the Q&A. Thank you so much. So what an amazing reading from all three of you. What a great pairing. A lot of political commentary and writing about what's going on in our world. Let's spotlight Mervyn and let's spotlight Douglas. This is Sophia's normal job and I'm slower at it than she is. But I'm learning. Okay. I think we maybe, let's see, can we? Yeah, good. Okay. So we normally start our Q&A for the sake of our students, asking all of our authors who come here to talk a little bit about advice that you would have for them about putting together a first collection. And it could be a chapbook, it could be a full length. And keep in mind that most of our students are older and they've come back to writing after they either gave it up earlier because life got in the way, or it's what they always wanted to do and they finally retired. And so now they're doing it. So any advice that you guys have for them would be very appreciated.
I'm gonna call some names if people don't volunteer. I'm gonna start calling names, taking names.
Start. I hate an awkward silence, so I live to fill it. I mean, for me, I find that when I sit down to write a poem, usually there's a whole soundtrack of other thoughts in the back of my head, a soundtrack that has followed me my entire life, things that I am obsessing about, things that I don't want to put down, all the things that I have previously thought of as distractions, I've reframed as obsessions. And it's really, I think, healthy and necessary for an artist to have obsessions, to be aware of what those obsessions are and to explore them and to interrogate them. So I would, what I tell my participants in the workshops that I teach is to always find a way that you can access, your childhood ethos, the things that influenced you, the artists, the songs that you loved, the shows that you enjoyed watching with your family, the music that was playing in your house, all of those things that have stayed with you. So, that's a really good place to start. And I think the constructs that come out of, trying to write professionally, I think it's better to start with what's simple is true, and then you'll find what your concerns are, and you'll understand how your poems are kind of speaking to each other, and you'll be able to like trace your obsessions, and you'll trace the threads, and you'll say, oh, this poem about my father, this poem, about a politician, like what's underneath them that is necessary and is necessitating that I write it. So those are the kinds of places and thought experiments that I champion my students to do.
It's a great answer. Wonderful connections you made there. And congratulations on that book that's coming. I know you're just excited and trying to keep it quiet, but you got to be just over the hill with that. Beautiful. Yeah, Douglas, you wanted to say?
Yeah, I would really like to build, collectively with Omotara and on this one. What you said at the end about like how the poems kind of work together and how they speak to each other. I think there's a tendency with a first book, and you see it with a lot of people, to just kind of like be like, these are my greatest hits, these are the best, like, and so you just kind of go like, I'm just gonna make sure they're all in there, which is fine. But something that I try to think about a lot is like the sort of micro, meso, and macro level, right? So the micro level is you have individual poems, right, that do certain things. Within those poems, there's going to be like sweeps and crescendos, and maybe it's all a kind of like a staccato monotone or something like that. Whatever your jam is, that's that micro level. Then you have the section, right? A group of poems. That's the meso level, the middle level. And that's composing a completely different piece of music, right? You have the independent music of a single poem, but then you have the music that happens when you group them together. Now, of course, not every poetry collection has multiple sections, right? But if you are doing that, then the meso level is kind of like, how does this section of the collection rise and fall? Is it a constant rise? Just being aware of the kind of energy with that. And then the macro level is the book, right? Right. Our tendency might be to, lead with our strongest poem or end with our strongest poem. But I always try to, let people know that the experience of reading a collection of poetry can feel like at the macro level reading a single one of your poems.
Wonderful.
Right. So when you're thinking about sequencing, really feel about what is the experience you're taking your reader through. Because sometimes those poems that you were like, this is a solid poem, but I don't like read it a lot, or I don't know, like when you put it between two other poems, sometimes that is exactly the bridge that brings you here. So that's the thing I think about in terms of sequencing. Just like think about all these different kinds of levels of energy and flow throughout your work.
And also, I guess with regard to your own work, Douglas, the idea of sound is important, right? So where you go low and where you go high, where the register changes all the time, I listening to you, it took me back to Amiri Baraka and how he would be on his tone would be up here and suddenly it would drop, and he would do these really crazy changes within there, but always keeping your attention, And so maybe one needs to hear how the music swells and goes down in poems, in a whole collection. Yeah, beautiful, wonderful. So, Cindy.
Yes, I will add to the obsession and the sections, and the idea of, in the first book, you want to put all your poems in. But for me, it was interesting that an individual poem really started each book. Like I can point to one poem that was the first poem I wrote that I was like, this is what I'm going to write about, So sometimes you might not realize that at first, but that's how it was for me. And in both cases, they were connected to local history. So one was related to the Lowell Mills, where my great grandmother worked as a mill girl and the other was related to Salem. So sometimes it helps to have something to sort of latch onto like that to build the manuscript with. And you may already have other poems that fit in, but, and the other thing is to think about form, because also sometimes having some form, whether that's sound or a formal, you know, like a sonnet or something, can also help to build that backbone of the work. So I would just, you know, think about the different dimensions that you want to put and the arc that you want to put into the book versus just, you know, if you have 50 poems that are all, you know, about, you know, they may not all go in the book. And I think the hardest thing is to not put some poems in, but that's often the best thing to do. And sometimes I find you have to write poems for the book. After you get to a certain point where you kind of know where you're going, you might have to say, well, I need to write some poems about this, and then create those poems. So
yeah. And your strongest poem may come out of that, right? That you already have all of these for the collection, and here you feel you need to put something, and that can end up being your best poem or your strongest poem in the book. Your poems, Cindy, they just hit me with how you ended sometimes on these notes. One poem ended with the word insinuate, and I thought that was just a marvelous way to close it, right? Like the flowers turned from beautiful red and then to burgundy and going into blood red, kind of, you know, the danger of it, you know. And then you said triplicate soon after that. And I got caught up in your 8 endings like that, you know. And you never know what's going to pull you along. You know, you're writing, you don't know, you're in that river and hoping that you're going to be okay, you know. But something takes you where you're going, you know, and if you recognize that, you're fortunate, right? That you can follow, you know. Yeah. Coming back just for a moment, Omotara, am I saying that correctly, Omotara?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. You I wanted to ask you, you say your dad is from Trinidad?
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you if that had any influence in your work. There was one line where you took a chance with the dirty wine. I heard that. You know? And I wanted to know if there was influence from your dad in terms of how you write or how you sound and so on, you know.
All of the above and more. My father has influenced so much of like the music of my book. You know, I can think of, when I think about the music that played and that we listened to during childhood, you know, I think of Sparrow. I listen to a lot of music that really influences like the rhythm and my love of language and my love of play, and that has stayed with me my entire life. And when I write my poems, what I enjoy most about it is actually saying them to like aloud to myself. Like the way that I write, I'm building a spell for myself. And if I don't feel lulled, if there's not an incantation, then that's not it. Then I try again, you know, I put it away. And I think too, just the idea of, you know, there's so much revolutionary music that's come out of Trinidad, but also, you know, out of Nigeria. And so the idea that music can sound one way, but the message that it carries, it's saying something completely different. That is something that I also play with in my poetry. Like I love a song that is happy and has a beat, but the message is totally serious, political, and it's undercutting. There's tension. And to me, my favorite songs, my favorite albums, they hold that kind of tension. There's so much going on. You don't hear it on the first listen. So absolutely, I would say, you know, the steel pan, you know, it's in my blood, and I hope, you know, it's my attempt to have it come out in the music of the poems.
But you're right about that music, right? The calypso, people are on the street and they're whining, but the calypso can be about a very tragic thing, you know, but they don't
It
stop.
often is.
You don't stop that shake, right? At all, you know, it keeps going, you know. And going back to Douglas, the language, I guess, sometimes we just don't have the words to say. The deed or the experience is beyond any word that we know. So we go guttural with that and just you stutter and you make odd noises, right? Something like that. And I don't want to take up this whole thing. Let's Jennifer go.
Well, I just was so struck by the way that the musicality of all three of you. I'm trying to think back in all the readings we've had, and I almost think that this is the one where the three poets were so emphatic about the language and the sound. You know, it was a really great trio for many reasons, but especially for that. I mean, Cindy, too, with your poem that rhymes. I think it was the divorce poem where everything is rhyming. I mean, that's a risky poem, and it really works. So sound was so important, and people were writing to me in the chat and writing to everyone in the chat about how different these books sound. You know, people who have read show how great it is as a book on paper, but it's another level entirely to hear Douglas reading from it. And I think a poem also like that, like Cindy's with that she just read with the rhyming, it's very different when you hear her read it. So it was particularly spectacular to hear what you guys do. And it was almost a masterclass just in how to read your own work. And speaking of risks, Douglas, I mean, that's your book. It has a lot of risks in it, and boy, does it pay off, you know? And I think that's one of the things that as teachers, we have to remember to tell our students to, you know, go with your gut. I mean, obviously you might have had people saying, well, maybe this is too much, or pull this back, or at any point did you have for show people saying maybe you don't want to include this part, and you just ignored that?
That's a great question, Jennifer. I mean, on one level, show is a tricky book for me to put out because, you know, as was said earlier, like so much of the history of my work has been this really overtly performative typography. And show doesn't have any of the kinds of, like, the joke I tell is every poem in show could have been written in Microsoft Word. Like there's not like I didn't need to use any special kinds of software. And so at some level that felt like an experiment for me. And I think that people oftentimes will say experimental is an aesthetic. And I would argue that it's not. Experimental is a process, right? Like if you've been doing Dada-esque cut-ups your entire life, trying to do a traditional Elizabethan sonnet is an experiment for you, and something's going to happen out of that. So, you know, I think that what happens with me, and when I'm thinking about work and listening to like feedback from friends and dear readers, is usually people will say, I don't think you're pushing it far enough. Like earlier drafts of some of these poems, you know, still have their shirts tucked in, you know, the top button up. And just this process of, I'll say one other thing about that then. You know, people oftentimes refer to the process of editing your work or revising your work as polishing. All right. Polishing is an artificial intervention that changes the nature of a surface, right? I like to think of the possibility of distressing, which is an artificial process that changes the nature of a surface. So instead of thinking that what I want my poems to do is to feel smoother, sleeker, or more an easier sheen, I want to distress the poem as an aesthetic process. And so that's usually what will happen. People will be like, is it there? And that usually is just an invitation to me to like try to do the most with it.
Cindy, I was taken with how you managed to bring that, because I've heard poems, and I think in the chat people mentioned that having heard poems about the Salem witch trials and so on, that it was done. But you did something completely different with it, you know, and it made me think that no subject is ever exhausted. You know, you brought it forward, and there was a line in there, and I hope I heard it right. You said, reconsider the not.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's like a whole world in that one line, right? She brings it
Yeah.
back from the thing, you know, reconsider the not. I would steal it if you hadn't read it tonight. I would.
Well, it's true. I mean, I did a lot of research reading through the actual transcripts from the trials, and their very words, and you know, that happened. I mean, the judge just basically said, hey, go back, you know, and basically go back, find her guilty. You know, I mean, it's just it's unbelievable.
It's amazing.
And Salem, Massachusetts it's all witch kitsch. It's all about, you know, the fun and the spells. I mean, there's a, you know, the Bewitched statue of Bewitched in the center of town. And it's just been, you know, shoved under the rug. And the real history is horrid. They were murdered, you know, I mean, it's just like so much of our history, right? It's just been used for marketing and, you know.
And the idea of bringing it into the light now is more and more shunned, right? It's close. Don't read these books and don't read that book and so on.
Right, and don't teach critical race theory, and don't read Mouse.
Poems are more likely to slip under the radar here, you know. Yeah, the prose will get caught, but the poems are more likely to slip under. Yeah. Jen?
Well, we have to let them go, but I am so grateful to all of you for your words, for your work, for your generosity in answering all of our questions so openly, everything that you suggested to our students. Thank you all so much. Please come back to read for us again in person someday, and all of you teach for us if you have time, because we would love to have you for a one-day workshop. I'm already thinking of interesting topics that the three of you could do. So be in touch, and we'll send you the chat, and we'll send you the link to the YouTube when it's up. Thank you all for being here. Don't forget our March readings, March 9th and March 20th, SHP. Thank you all so much. Good night.
Wonderful. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mervyn.
Mervyn.
Thank you. So great to read with you too. Thank you.
Likewise, Cindy. Thank you so much.
You guys were amazing.
Your word.
It's a beautiful night.
And thank you, Mervyn. You did great.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Mervyn really should have my job.
You're a good team.
Take care, Jen.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.